every time there's an article written, they talk about, oh, the overtime bill is costing this amount of money. Yeah, but what is it bringing back? What is the money that, not just spending, but what about the increase in productivity of 13.65%, which is $191 million in new tax receipts from corporate, and 1.9% increase in individual income taxes, which is $130-something million. So it's not costing, it's actually bringing in more money. And so it's a no-brainer. Whereas these other measures like the Choose Act is really draining the budgets. And so for me, it's a no-brainer. We're pushing and we're draining our budgets. We try to put the cart before the horse.
All right, I'm getting war plans. Hold on. Yeah. Sorry.
I'm thinking that you had an emergency text message come in from your wife or something.
Oh no,
That's
I'm sorry.
hilarious.
I was the Secretary of Defense. He texts all of us now. I just started. I don't know what's happening. He just
That's
sends us plans
hilarious.
and asks us our opinion on what's going on.
That's funny, man.
Welcome in. It's Alabama Politics this week. Josh Moon and
David Person, who's not getting any text messages.
well,
apparently.
listen. Yeah, hey, keep your head up. You'll get in. They'll come around to you. Well, they'll add you. Apparently, you don't need your phone number to be in anybody's phones or anything for it to be added to this signal
Yeah,
chat.
apparently not.
Yeah. So that's that is the topic of the day, the week. I'm assuming the month. It's one of the few things that's managed to hold on for a full 24 to 48 hours, and so I'm guessing it'll hang on for a little while longer because these idiots are too dumb to just acknowledge the mistake and try to put out some punishment and then move forward. But that's where we are. So we'll talk about that. But first, we need to tell you about our friends at Wind Creek Entertainment who sponsored this thing and keep us going. Because this is Alabama Politics This Week, brought to you by Wind Creek Entertainment. We really appreciate what they do. As I told everybody, I actually heard from a couple of people who went to Wind Creek over the weekend while the games were on. Said that they had a fantastic time. I think one guy went to the Montgomery location. Another guy was at Wetumpka, and talked about just what a great time they had with some of the things that were taking place around the tournament, NCAA tournament, and just kind of how things are going around there. It was a great time. Listen, you get great food. You have great entertainment. You have a good spa. You have a nice pool setting, which it's still a little chilly up this way, but down a little south of us, it's hitting upper 80s this weekend. So, pool looking pretty good. Pool's looking pretty good out there, and they have a nice place at both. I know at both the Wetumpka and Atmore locations, you can get out around the pool and have a good time. So look them up online, Wind Creek Entertainment. Book a stay, book a reservation at Fire. Go by, have a nice dinner, have a nice time. I'm telling you, you're not going to regret it, man. If you're in that area, just book a trip to the spa. I'm telling you, you're not going to regret it. All right.
Spa's nice. Spa's real nice.
Yeah,
smells great. You walk in, it just smells great.
Yeah,
love it.
That's nice. It's a nice. They do top quality, and it will be a fantastic experience. That and if you take your significant other, I'm telling you, man, you'll be able to watch all the games. Okay, you do this one thing, you watch all the games. Baseball season started last night. I know y'all listen to this Friday morning. Y'all be able to watch. I'm telling you, listen. This is the rule of life to live by. You just want to watch the game. Okay.
Yeah,
don't
put some Wind
do
Creek in the
shit
piggy
that
bank.
makes it to where you can't watch the game. All right. Do stuff that makes it to where you can watch the game.
That's
right?
it. That's it.
Yeah.
That's every man's dream, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's like
Just
Bill
watch
Burr.
the game and eat some good food while you're watching the game.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. And it's it's like Bill Burr said. All you gotta do is every now and then agree to some shit that you would never agree to ordinarily. Farmers market, yeah. Yeah. I mean, just something like that. That's all you gotta do.
Yeah.
That's all you gotta do.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So
Text messages, man.
Only
Crazy.
the top people, David. Only the top people.
Crazy.
We are hiring on merit. With none of this DEI nonsense.
That's right.
Listen, I remember when Lloyd Austin was, he probably texted some war plans to some people, I mean, probably. It didn't come out.
And the general that they just fired, who was, what was he, the black guy who was over the Joint Chiefs? He probably did something like that where they just fired.
Yeah,
he probably
I'm sure.
did that. He probably did it a few times.
Well, those were DEI hires.
And then that's right. And then what about that white? There was a white lady general, I think, that they maybe admiral. I can't remember.
In the Navy.
That they ceremoniously
yes.
got rid of.
Yep.
Hey, these are all. That's the kind of stuff that those kind of people do.
Yeah.
The DEIs. That's what they do.
Yeah. So listen, I'll recap slightly. Although if you're listening to a podcast that has politics in the name, it's highly unlikely that by this point you've not heard, kind of the basic details of what happened. But Jeffrey Goldberg, a writer with The Atlantic, was mistakenly added into a group text on Signal in which intricate details of war plans were being discussed by the upper echelons of our government. And when I say upper echelons, I mean that in the lowest sense possible, because it was these idiots, Hegseth, J.D. Vance, Tulsi Gabbard, Radcliffe, all the people that would ordinarily you could put your trust in, but none of these should you have any trust in whatsoever, because they're all utterly incompetent and all utterly handed jobs simply because of who they supported or how they supported or what laws they were willing to break to support the idiot in chief and his co-president, who's, I don't know, running some other company that should be making billions of dollars at this point. And it just, to watch the hearing, the Senate hearing that took place the day after all of this came to light, or 2 days after, when I think came to light on Sunday, maybe it was Monday. And so the Tuesday they had the Senate hearing in which Tulsi Gabbard, Radcliffe, Kash Patel, it's always a pleasure. Christ, it's like Kash Patel just like he just must sit at his house and just scream at walls. I mean, he just seems like such an unhappy individual. And it's but they're all sitting at this table, and the questions that are relayed to them and their answers back are so utterly fucking stupid and ridiculous and nonsensical. Tulsi Gabbard, who won't admit that she's on the text chain when everybody can see that she's on the text chain. Okay. Right. I mean, it's just ridiculous, that some of the responses and about how we can't release this stuff because it's classified. But no classified information was discussed on the chat. I mean, if you were upset for a second about Hillary Clinton, having a server at her house, then this right here, you should be screaming at people, trying to get everybody involved in this thing fired, because there is nothing that Hillary Clinton did that came close to
not
this
even
right
remotely.
Here. Not even remotely close. Almost everything, aside from one document that she emailed to another State Department staffer, everything else was deemed classified after the fact. And through all of that, the only the only people that she ever disclosed it to were people within the State Department who should have had access to that stuff. All right. The manner in which she did it was wrong, but go ahead.
Well, and let's not forget that according to media reports, one of the people who was a part of this text chain using Signal, which, as we've already established, is a commercial app subject to, not subject to the same kind of, I guess, technology that would make it as safe as it should be for classified material. One of those people was in Russia.
Yeah.
At the time that these texts were being circulated, and Russia has been known, according to media reports coming from the intelligence community, has been known to target Signal specifically.
Yeah.
Specifically.
Yeah,
This
I
is a
don't.
colossal clown show, Josh.
It is. Although I don't have as much of a problem with that, simply because there was already a Russian asset on the text chain. I mean, JD Vance was on there, so I mean, Jesus Christ, what more do you need?
Oh,
How much
okay.
more
Yeah, I forgot
access did
about
they
that.
need out of this thing?
I forgot about that. That's a good
Yeah,
point.
so he was
Good
probably
point.
just relaying, taking screenshots and sending them to the Kremlin
Yeah.
as it was.
Yeah.
But it is, first of all, there's another portion of this that should not be overlooked. Okay. And it's this. Here is the highest group of offices. Okay. I just can't refer to the people.
Secretary of State and National
all of these
Intelligence
people.
Director, other folks. Yeah. Secretary
Here's
of Defense.
all of them
Yeah.
using an app to communicate instead of going through the standard sources, the approved communications avenues out of there. And what they're doing, the reason why they're doing it, this was part, by the way, of the recommendations related to Project 2025. The reason they're doing it is they're getting around the data collection and information, document saving portion of our government that makes these things, that holds these things in place so they can be reviewed, and that there's an official record created that can be either reviewed by the public if they are public documents, or that can be, in the case of such a thing like this right here, can be reviewed
Excellent
by the
point.
appropriate people when the time comes. Because let's say
Excellent
on this
point.
text chain, somebody said, you know what? Yeah, there's going to be a lot of casualties out there, but what the hell with them? Let's bomb it anyways,
Yeah.
and somebody, and there is an incident somewhere, and there is an accident, and a lot of, let's say, U.S. service members are accidentally killed during this situation, and people want to know, well, there needs to be an official record of this. And under ordinary communication standards, there is an official record created that can be reviewed by people on the Senate Intelligence Committees, by various agencies that are in charge of examining those things and holding people accountable. It's how we knew a lot of the information, a lot of it, that ultimately cleared the people involved, but it's how we knew a lot about the Benghazi situation, because these people communicated through the proper network and the proper channels. And so when you're not doing that, you're getting around that. And that, right, in and of itself should be a violation of protocol and standards.
That's
that
right.
should be should be a fireable offense. I mean, all of these are white people, so nobody's going to get fired. So and they're all Republicans, and so they're just. I mean, Mike Johnson the next day talking about, well, this is a mistake, and they're going to make sure this doesn't happen again. The fuck are you talking about?
Yes.
What do you mean?
What the heck? I mean,
You're gonna make
he was so quickly dismissive and even, I would say, cavalier about it.
Yes.
And we know, like you said earlier, he and others had their hair on fire when it was Hillary Clinton. They had their hair on fire.
Listen, dude, they spent months on freaking Hunter Biden.
Yes.
On Hunter Biden and his laptop and his bullshit.
The hypocrisy is stunning. Well, it's not really stunning because we've seen it before, but it's just remarkable. It really has you shaking your head. And then the other thing that it makes me wonder is, do they even really believe anything that they ever say about other people?
No.
Do they really?
Well,
I think they don't. I don't think they do.
Well, yes, I think they do. Okay, but this has always been my problem. And all right, and I'm going to do a blanket thing here, and it'll irritate some people, and that's fine. But my problem with conservatives is always that they're so childlike. All right, and I mean it in a number of different ways, and in the most meaningful way is they have this insane childlike ability to fail to recognize their hypocrisy on things like this, to hold people to a standard and to be outraged by the very same actions that they're currently taking themselves. I mean, you see it all. How many times have we seen it out of these people where they rant and rave and rail against some action, whether it be adultery, whether it be, hell, pedophilia or whatever. And then they get busted immediately, like within days after making these grand statements and this shit, for doing the exact same thing. All right. And it's just, you're like, and it's not like a little small, like they just agreed with somebody else saying it. They're like writing op-eds and shit, talking about how horrible this certain action is. And then days later, they're the people that are committing that action. And you're like, what? How do you not see this? And it's the same with these people right here, where they've just rant and raved about Hillary Clinton and the protection of documents. Well, did she store them in her bathroom like this asshole did that's currently your president that you've just reelected? I mean, the hypocrisy of all of this is so mind-boggling, infuriating, that it's just... Oh my God, it's hard to, it's honestly, sometimes you just got to turn it off. It's hard for me to take.
I know some people will be offended by what you said because they think that it's some sort of a unfair application of principle to see conservatives that way. But if you really think about it, and I think this is what I'm about to share, I think is a good example of the dichotomy that you're talking about or that you're alluding to. So, Bill Clinton gets, caught with the Monica Lewinsky, situation and all of that. And guess what happens? Democrats began to excoriate him.
Yes.
Democrats do. I mean, it took a while to get there, but when we finally got there, Democrats were not hesitating to excoriate the president, President Clinton. Just a little bit after that, we discovered that Newt Gingrich was basically doing the same thing, or at least a variation of the same thing.
Right.
Infidelity in another way, right? And you didn't hear Republicans, I don't recall any Republicans taking him to task in any meaningful way, or even remotely at the level that Democrats took Clinton to task. No. So I think you're right. There is something, and I'm going to, as I've been in a religious community. I've been a part of a religious community all my life, and what I have seen is not just in my community, but in other religious communities, there is this tendency among people who claim to be people of faith to have a low expectation of grace for somebody they don't agree with, but a high expectation of grace for themselves.
Yep. And
I would include myself in this. I'm probably as guilty of that as anybody else. There's something about there's something about religion. There's something about it, and I don't know what it is, probably just our frail humanness, that when it is applied to that frail humanity, we develop this sort of disproportionate, view of how others should be treated versus how we should be treated. We don't want mercy and grace for that guy because we don't agree with him or her, but we want it for ourselves. Yeah. If we're guilty of the same thing, we expect mercy and grace for ourselves.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, it is, man, it honestly, some days it really gets to me to watch people, take these hardline approaches with people, and it happens. I'll tell you, man, it happens a lot when you cross racial lines. When you're talking about, Hispanic people or black people or something and white people, the standard to which a lot of people are held. Well, just look at it. Just put in perspective, the difference between what a guy wearing a nice fancy suit does and what the guy on, that's a drug dealer or, a standard, drug dealer, whatever. Let's take some of these people and talk about the overall harm that they do to not just individuals, but entire communities. And in some cases, you're talking about, a pharmaceutical CEO, for example, that's been pushing
Right.
opioids. Let's talk
Right.
about the Sackler family and what they've done, and not a single one of them going to jail for some of the shit that they pulled with, thousands and thousands of people dead because of the way they handled the product and stuff. But I guarantee you, there are a number of people who think much differently out there about those people because of how they look and how they act and whatever station they have in life and things that they've accumulated, versus the guy that is selling drugs or even taking drugs, even had an addiction problem. And
Yep.
we, look at our prisons and the way that we just turn a blind eye to the suffering of those folks because, well, they shouldn't have done bad. While at the same time, we treat these people completely differently, even though they've done far worse bad. And it's just that level of hypocrisy at times, it drives a lot of the problems that we have in the country. And the problem for a lot of Democrats is we don't have the same cultish attitude that Republicans have right now. And I think that you look at what's taking place. I mean, look at Robert Menendez, for example. I mean, did you hear any Democrats saying, "Oh, that guy, he's being railroaded. We gotta stop this"? No. You guys are like, go bars. Fuck him. Get him out of here.
Yep.
And he's gone. You don't even hear about him anymore.
Nope.
It's just,
he's out of there.
Yeah. And
He's out
I
of
don't know,
there.
man. It just, it really bugs me from time to time. I mean, especially in situations like this where, this is a serious deal. And it's not just a serious deal because somebody made a mistake. The reason the mistake was made was because they were trying to circumvent laws and norms and regulations and to do so in a cavalier way. And, and they got caught. They got caught doing it in a very embarrassing manner. And then, to kind of twist that back around, Hegseth immediately off the plane after this happens and starts talking about Jeffrey Goldberg being a Democrat and a disgraced journalist who all has a penchant for making things up. And you're like, how the fuck does it make it any better that you let that guy then into the chat?
Yeah.
I mean,
it makes you look worse.
yes.
If that's really what you think, it makes you look worse. I'm glad you brought up the race aspect, because we black folks have been living with that dynamic, of course, since, for about 400 plus years here in this country where, and we talk about it. We see the clear hypocrisy in what is done in this country, which is that black people and white people can be guilty of the same thing, but the expectation is always that if it's a black person doing it, then, there's something deeply wrong with black people and black culture. If it's a white person that's doing the very same thing, there's some kind of allowance that's made. One recent example of that we black people talk about when we have our annual meetings is
I've been to a couple. I mean, but
that's probably must have been in our summer meetings when you have a tan.
Yeah, it is. Yes, that's what happened.
Yeah,
what happened.
The tan and the bald head probably that's what gets you in. That's what gets you in.
I went to get barbecue, and I was like, "Come on in," and it's just it.
So the recent example is this whole thing of what happens with drug addiction. You talked about that earlier. So black drug addicts are characterized as criminals. White drug addicts are characterized as people who have health issues.
Victims. They're victims. They're victims of the system.
Victims, and we need to do something to help them. But black drug addicts, we need to lock them up. There haven't been many, but there have been a small number of black serial killers. Well, they're criminals. They're animals even, perhaps, some would say. White serial killers, it's a mental health issue. We need to address that. That's what we see from our side of the race line.
I don't know how you might see it differently.
this constant, excusing of white bad behavior as something that deserves some level of sympathy, maybe even some level of medical treatment, but black bad behavior of the same type, incarceration,
Lock 'em up.
execution.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean,
we see that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the difference between the crack epidemic and the opioid epidemic.
Great point.
I mean,
Great
it's just
point.
there's
cracking
nothing that highlights it
cocaine.
any better.
Or cracking cocaine.
Yeah, nothing
Another great
highlights it any
example.
better than that.
Yeah.
It's just, I mean, there was, both are deadly, both were, were just run rampant through communities, but one affected a lot of white people. And so all of a sudden, this was a real issue in which victims were being harmed
Health
by
crisis.
community
Health
health.
crisis.
Oh, it's a health crisis. We've got to get
Yeah.
a handle on this thing, and we've got to,
Mhm.
and in the meantime, we had our own government sending in crack cocaine into
Right.
inner city communities, and so it just honestly, man, it is it's endlessly frustrating. God, it is so endlessly frustrating to me. And to watch this and to watch these people try to spin this thing into something else, and to watch, I posted about it, and of course I had a handful of MAGAs, on just making their comments and talking about how it's really odd that the one journalist that gets added just happens to be a Democrat. How did that? I mean, what do you think happened? What do you think happened? I mean, what happened? What happened here?
Yeah.
It's just so, that when we've gotten to the point to where, and I talked to a guy that's is about as conservative as you can be yesterday, in pretty much all things, but takes a pretty logical approach to a lot of other stuff, and he was saying, man, when we got to the point here where it didn't matter about the truth of things anymore, and he said we lost, and he he was bemoaning the Republican Party and conservatives in general, and about the way that they have gone about things in the Trump era of stuff, and where it just doesn't seem to make any difference at all anymore what somebody does or says, and that's true. And this sort of thing, how it's being taken and how people are responding to it. And, I hope Democrats get a spine on this thing and start holding some people accountable and hold some hearings, and make sure that there is some justice meted out for this, because this is about as serious as you can get. And these idiots, that if they continue down this pathway with this group of morons in charge, they're going to get a lot of service members killed. And I mean, we're lucky that didn't take place this time. We're lucky that they didn't get some people killed, and that's a very serious thing. And if you think it's overstating it, it's not. And if you doubt that, go watch John Ossoff question some of the folks that were at that hearing yesterday, particularly the two military guys who were there, who did not bring any bullshit with them about anything. And when he asked them, is having this information that was discussed in this Signal chat, would that have been something that you would have tried to collect, and something that would have aided you in creating a counter plan to this, and listen to their answers? And I mean, it's a stunning failure. It really is. And the fact that people are not, some people may not be outraged about it is really just atrocious to me. So, all right.
Agreed.
Let's slide out. We're going to come back with Anthony Daniels and talk about taxes and the good things that Democrats have for your plans, for addressing a lot of the problems that people actually worry about and care about, and things that keep them up at night. So, all right, we're going to come back in just a minute. It's Alabama Politics This Week, brought to you by Wind Creek Entertainment. All righty, welcome back. Alabama Politics This Week. Josh Moon, David Person, and we are happy, as always, to have with us the House Minority Leader. That's Anthony Overtime Daniels, coming in strong. Got the OT tax. I'm going to start calling you the tax man. Like Kramer from Seinfeld. You're the tax man. this has been an interesting few weeks for you and for the rest of the Democrats. I would say in the House, at least, with this tax situation that's taking place. It seems as though y'all have the Republicans scrambling a little bit to try to catch up with y'all on some of the tax relief packages that you put in place, and also trying to figure out a way to both kill the overtime tax and keep from getting primary on the backside of doing so. So has it been as interesting as it seems?
It has, man. It's been quite interesting. But you'll have a lot of Republicans that say, "Hey, guy, Anthony, when are you gonna drop that bill? I want to make sure that I'm a co-sponsor on that bill, despite the pushback on the other side." And so you had a number of people say, "Look, I'm all on board, man. I'm getting calls from my constituents. I'm getting calls from my son. I'm getting called from other individuals that are really benefited from the cutting the removing the tax on overtime." And I just we just need to extend that thing, and these tax packages that we've introduced, we hadn't even talked to the Senate about it, so we're trying to get ahead of you. And I said,
Mm.
well, that's I understand that. I said, but when you explain it to a voter that is only 1 cent out of on a dollar, it's a different meaning than saying, "Hey, we're going to cut your grocery taxes." And
Yeah.
when they hear you're going to cut my grocery taxes, they're thinking that the entire 10% or 9% is going to be cut, not knowing that it's one
Oh,
cent on a dollar. So you're
Yeah.
basically cutting me down, and I'm paying 99 cents instead of a dollar. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Listen, man, you spend 100, you get a whole dollar back.
I'm serious.
So yeah, it's no, it is ridiculous. First of all, what people need to understand is all of this stuff about repealing the overtime tax goes back to the fact that they're currently trying their best to give rich people a tax break on sending their kids to private schools. All right, that's where a lot of this is coming from. It's coming from Arthur Orr, coming from the folks that run the education budget, Danny Garrett as well. They are worried to death about this hole that's going to be blown in the education budget by this Choose Act that they've got. Right now, it's $100 million. There's a cap on it. Even with the cap and all of the restrictions placed on who can take part of this thing, even with all of the restrictions that they currently have in place, it is still going. Nearly 70% of the money is going to people who are already have their kids in private schools. They've never attended public schools, already in private schools, so it's going to the rich families out there anyway. And when they remove those caps and remove those restrictions in a couple of years, it's going to blow a hole 5 times as big into that thing at a minimum, and they're going to be left struggling. And so what they're wanting to do is take the money back from the poor working folks out here that are going to work every day and scrambling, trying to feed their families and stuff, and you've given them a tax break to incentivize that work and hard labor and taking care of their families, and they're going to try to give that money and fill in this hole that they've created by giving this money over to these other folks. Is Do you think that message has gotten to people?
I think the message that we're seeing that's resonating with people is when they weigh the two, when they weigh removing 1 cent off of the grocery tax, and when they weigh seeing 4 or 5 thousand additional dollars in their paycheck from the overtime, cutting the taxes on overtime, and they're saying, it doesn't make sense. You're spending 130 something million or whatever it is for a grocery tax when there's already a segment of the population that don't pay taxes on groceries anyway. If you're have SNAP benefits, you don't pay
Mm.
taxes on groceries. So to say that it's touching every Alabamian is actually false and misleading. It's something that you're just it sounds good and it's a good talking point, but it
Mhm.
doesn't put money back in the pockets of Alabamians. The other piece is what we're hearing about the Choose Act is more and more is that a lot of homeschool families are taking advantage of the Choose Act. And
Yep.
so it's not necessarily if its intended purposes was to improve the quality and options for education, but instead and improving the quality of education, then they're certainly not doing that. Because one of the things that we found is they don't want to have an assessment. So if my child leaves a public school and go to a private school, there's no assessment that follows them to tell me whether or not the investment in the private school is better and they're better performing in the private school than they did in the public school. And so when we talk about accountability, there is no accountability. And so when you start having deep conversations about people in rural, especially in rural communities and urban communities and suburban communities that really want to keep their public schools in place and don't want to have to share those dollars that taking away dollars from their public schools and giving it to private education that doesn't play by the same rules, and you start to see people get the pushback, and they're not understanding the cost. Every time there's an article written, they talk about, oh, the overtime bill is costing this amount of money. Yeah, but what is it bringing back? What is the money that not just spending, but what about the increase in productivity? 13.65%, which is $191 million in new tax receipts from corporate, and 1.9% increase in individual income taxes, which is $130-something million. So it's not costing, it's actually bringing in more money. And so it's a no-brainer. Whereas these other measures like the Choose Act is really draining the budgets. And so for me, it's a no-brainer. We're pushing and we're draining our budgets. We try to put the cart before the horse. And we talk about accountability and we talk about measuring things and saying, okay, how is this going to be impactful? We're not even measuring the big ticket item that we passed that's $100 million cap, and we have already in the legislation, it removes the caps in a couple of years. So then it's no cap, but instead of the overtime, you want to cap it at a year and a half.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Because it's working for working class people.
yeah, no, it is. It's insanity. And this one point out one other thing. Last year, this same group of people who were whining about this also gave a tax break to the top tax bracket earners. All right. They shaved a 0.5 percentage point off of the top tax bracket earners, which would right now almost fully replace what they're whining about coming out of for the overtime tax act.
And the same individuals that are actually not for gaming. And so you're talking about, and so for me, we're in a posture right now is, okay, you're against gaming and generating more revenue, but you want to provide breaks to people that really don't need it with no accountability. And then you want to control the dollars. If we expanded gaming and you voted no, you want to still control the dollars that we'll bring in from gaming. Hell no, we're not going to go for that. Why would I let you spend money on something that you oppose? Like, who does that?
So I hate to do this, but I'm going to ask you, Representative Daniels, to rewind just a little bit because, and maybe I'm just slow this morning, but it almost sounded to me as though when you and Josh were talking earlier that you're not in favor of the current bill that wants to reduce the grocery tax from 3% to 2%. Did I misunderstand that?
You did misunderstand that, because what my message is that if we're going to cut the grocery tax, it needs to be totally cut, not just 1 cent at a time.
Okay.
And so what I see is it's a talking point to say we're cutting the grocery tax instead of telling the truth to say that we're only cutting 1 cent. And 1 cent on a dollar, right? You're basically saving 1 cent on a dollar.
Right. Right.
And if the second this bill passes the Senate, it'll be 2 cents on a dollar, right? So it's costing you over $200-something million for 2 cents. When I looked at a sign yesterday, David, I went to the Waffle House. It was 2 days ago to pick up my daughter, some breakfast because she was out sick. And on the sign below the register, you know what it said? It said, due to the nationwide increase in demand for eggs, we're going to add a surcharge of 50 cents per egg. So you tell me, how the hell 2 cents with an increase of 50 cents, how am I going to feel that? So our focus, for me, our focus should be, how do we incentivize farmers within the state and in surrounding states that do, fruits and vegetables? How do we incentivize them to get their product to market within the state that we're living in, so that it creates competition and it drives down costs overall? Then you're talking about 50 cents to $1 reduction in costs, instead of 1 cent that costs us over $100 million on 1 cent out of $1, when we can drive down costs even more for families. And with the overtime, you're providing more, putting more money in their pockets so that they can spend and buy more for their families. And so I'm just saying that it sounds good, but when you hold it and say 1 cent on the dollar versus eliminating the grocery tax on groceries, it's a totally different meaning. It doesn't even poll at 40% when you talk about 1 cent. But when you talk about cutting grocery tax in general, it polls high.
Got you.
So we've always been for eliminating the tax on groceries.
Right. And I agree with you 100%. That's the goal. That's the objective. But this incremental approach, you're saying there's no real gain in it, is what I hear you saying.
No, there's no gain. I think the bigger gain would be to figure out how to get products to market from the agriculture industry, since their exports are really in jeopardy because of the tariffs. And there's a lot of uncertainty there. And you've seen on the news where the cuts that farmers are experiencing at the federal level. And so I think that we, just like I've always felt about the defense industry, if we start shifting the focus for them to be able to do business on the state side, it'll help sustain them long term. And that's the same thing I think about the farmers. Incentivizing them to get their products to market. Right now, there's a program out there, I think, I'm not sure if it's still in existence, where individuals that are on SNAP benefits or in general, if they're buying from a local farmer's market, there's no taxes on on the items that they're selling. So there was some, I think it may have been SNAP benefits, or it may have been in general on certain products. And so the benefit is the cost is much lower, because they're able to sell directly without having to go through a lot of the bidding process and other things, right? And so when you're buying from a farmer's market, a lot of times those fruits and vegetables are a lot cheaper than a regular store. So if we created more competition to sell directly to the grocery stores, it'll drive down some of the costs. So then you, instead of saving 1 cent, you're saving 50 cents.
Right.
Until you're in a position to really totally eliminate the taxes on groceries, but you're using some of the dollars that you would have been taking a hit from by taking the 1 cent off. You're using those dollars to drive more competition in the market.
Okay. So let's go back to
I voted for it now. So don't get me wrong, it's a political suicide if you don't vote for any tax.
Right.
But I just know that there's a better way of doing it.
Right. I got you. So let's go back to your what you observed at Waffle House. 50 cents per egg sounds to me as though that's going to be extraordinarily, over time, that's going to be cost prohibitive for folks. So what is the plan? You've made this grassroots observation. How do we incentivize what you're talking about so that farmers can do business in state to try to bring those costs down in a way that the consumers will be able to afford it?
I think that we first have to put together an agriculture accelerator, which will help folks that are in the farming industry scale a lot of what they're doing, but also invite more people into the market. You identify certain items that, whether it's fruits, if you start with fruits and vegetables, right? If you start with fruits and vegetables alone, and you encourage and incentivize mass production of fruits and vegetables, with an incentive to those that are doing business for those stores within the state that are doing business directly with local farmers within the state of Alabama. So what that does is it gives them an opportunity to buy that product that they have brought in from other places in other states. It'll incentivize them. It'll drive down costs because they'll be able to buy it at a more reduced rate because we've incentivized it, right? And so
Okay.
the actual store and the actual farmer will have incentives, whether it's tax credits or grant opportunities for mass production, for materials for mass production, or whatever it is to help them mass produce some of the items that we have on a list. So if you have a list of fruits and vegetables that are necessity items, right? They're more healthy items. And so you start with those items and then you expand as you move forward. But it'll start driving down the cost because right now there's no competition. If I've been buying my products from the same place for 20 years, right? There's no incentive for me to buy it from this local farmer because they don't have the ability to mass produce it at the rate that I need it. And so we're giving money, we're incentivizing the farmer to mass produce, and we're giving them the support that they need from an accelerator standpoint, helping them scale their operations, while at the same time incentivizing the supermarket or whatever to buy some of their products directly from local farmers.
So while you were talking, because I'll be honest with you, I'd never heard the term agricultural accelerator. I had to look that up. So so I looked it up and I found while you were explaining that Hudson Alpha actually has one. Hudson Alpha in Huntsville. This website says they're not currently accepting applications, but as my final question to you, is the creation of an agricultural accelerator something that the state can do, or does that have to be something done by a private nonprofit like Hudson Alpha?
You want to make certain that it's done by a nonprofit like at Hudson Alpha, but you have a lot of accelerators in other sectors across the state of Alabama that can easily plug and play. And I think that Hudson Alpha is probably focused on a certain area of agriculture. And so if we put out an RFP to say, here are the items, right? Here are the areas that we want to incentivize. And so then you'll start to have more people, they may get out of some of the business that they're in from an agriculture standpoint and want to go into this area, this sector. And so they can be created. Right now you have a number of accelerators in tech across the state of Alabama. Before we were able to give grants out from the Department of Commerce, or starting the Department of Commerce, now Innovate Alabama is giving out grants and has taken over that portion for commerce to provide dollars for accelerators. And so you just put in these put in dollars that's specifically targeted toward agricultural accelerators in certain areas.
Okay.
It strikes me as we're talking about this stuff and kind of just the reality of what's going on. That y'all have, I'm talking about Democrats, better ideas and better plans for especially for business, for farming, for addressing a lot of the issues that are currently taking real issues. I'm not talking about, transgender kids in bathrooms and other made up nonsense like that, but real actual issues, whether it be the overtime tax or whether it be the tax package that actually affects real people, or the agriculture accelerator, and talking about lowering prices and stuff. Do you think that people, the average voter in Alabama, the hard red state that we're living in, that's given us this super majority, do you feel like people are realizing the difference currently between the two parties in terms of serious approaches to the things that are affecting them?
Well, thanks to folks like you and David, I think that our message is getting out there to our base, which is giving us an opportunity to use platforms like this to talk about what we're for. Of course, we do weekly press conferences. And so, of course, the folks that are showing up to those press conferences kind of write the articles based upon, how they're led to write the articles. And so some of that information is getting out. But we know that from a newspaper standpoint, folks are getting their information from podcasts, they're getting their information from traditional sources, and it's very limited from a newspaper standpoint. And so we're trying to do everything that we can to ensure that the information, the things that we're doing is out there throughout the state of Alabama. And so which is why we've been inviting more groups to come to the state house that we can do legislative updates to. That's why right now my members have been tasked to start doing town hall meetings throughout their districts on federal and state issues. And so when you're addressing some of these issues and how they impact, because the federal tariffs and other things impact what goes on in the state. The funding with NIH funding cuts, the Social Security Administration cuts that are the offices that have been closed in what Gaston and other places, the employees that have lost their jobs there. The impact that on Restaurant Marshall or Maxwell Air Force Base and the cuts and how the cuts that are being experienced in those places. And so we're trying to make certain that people understand what's impacting them and the communities that they live in, as well as providing a state solution to solving the problems while understanding the cuts and the impact of the cuts that we're experiencing from the federal level is impacting the state. So we're making adjustments on things that's going to help families, right? And so when you're looking at I overheard a lady in the grocery store, two ladies in the grocery store talking about the prices of eggs. And one lady said, I'm going to have to pass on the bacon this time because my niece has recently lost her job. She had a federal job. She's lost her job. And so she's moving back home, moving back to Alabama. And so we're going to have extra mouths to feed at our breakfast table. And this lady said that she's basically living on her retirement benefits and Social Security. And so she hadn't had really a cost of living increase. She's a retired educator, hadn't had a cost of living increase to be able to afford it. And so it's at the point, Josh and David, to where this lady opened the carton of eggs to look to make sure that there wasn't a broken egg inside. That's how desperate people are right now. Because of the cost of eggs and other items, they're looking to make certain that they're not taking something home that they will have to throw away because money is tight. And so that's the reality that we're faced with right now. And everyone wants to be silent and allow the executive branch at the federal level to legislate. We're allowing the federal branch at the executive branch in Washington, D.C. to legislate. So why do we have representatives? Why do we have senators if we're going to allow them to legislate?
Yeah. No, well,
And so,
well, yeah. Yeah. I mean, and also don't forget about texting out war plans to people. You do that as well. And so, but yeah, no, you're right. And we had Ken Martin on, the new DNC chair, a couple weeks ago, and we talked to him, and I brought up something that we have complained about on here, you and I, in both on the podcast and in conversation, which is the fact that too often the national party that controls a good portion of the money, doesn't support parties in states that they feel like are red states, and they don't put any money. Now he says that's changing. That they are going to devote resources. That they're taking a full 57 state. And I know that, but he's talking about the territories and all that, but full 57 state view of everything, that they don't believe any state is unwinnable. They're going to put money into places like Alabama. They're going to devote money to resources like podcasts and stuff to get out to meet the people where they are. And I wonder if that is something that's just in the works, or have you heard about this from them? Is there any indication that things are going to change, that y'all are going to get some help?
well, I hope that things change. And in fact, I would suggest that Ken Martin hold some calls with minority leaders and speakers, Democratic in states across the country. to kind of share this information with us, because hearing it from you is the first time I've heard that that was the case. Which is why um, I think that for me it's important that there's a lot of cleanup that happens in the states, and that we um, our polling even down to the polling. Like I can't use national polling to determine how to win a seat in Alabama,
Mm-hmm.
because there's been such an echo chamber in place for so long, to where there are key words that that trigger certain things. So if you notice that from a Democratic caucus standpoint, we've been focusing a lot more on issues that may not be traditionally Democratic leaning issues from a national perspective, but it's gotten our point across, and it's actually reached the goal, and it met the goal that we were seeking, right? And so we talked about a state version of government efficiency, that anything that's over $50 million should be dynamic scored. Why is that important? That's important because people that control the purse talk about being conservative until they have the purse.
Yeah.
And so if you want to test the waters, you have to test the waters in a non-traditional way. So forcing individuals to have to explain the dollars they're putting in the budget for item A and item B. And we've seen in the budget for 20, 30 years, but we've not seen any real results from it. So why are we still funding it? We got to make room for things that are actually going to work. And we cannot wait until the $50 million is already spent to determine whether or not it was worth it. Yeah. It has to be ongoing. And it has to be the same level of scrutiny that we give to folks in higher ed, the same level of scrutiny that we give to public schools, but that we're not giving to private schools that's receiving public money. So I just want us to be fair and consistent across the board, because if we pass something that required dynamic scoring, the Accountability Act would be on the chopping block. The Voucher to Choose Act will be on the chopping block. All of those items would be looked at differently. And so, which is why no one wants to do dynamic scoring besides me and my caucus.
Yeah. Yeah, they freaked out. They freaked out. I mean, I've never seen people freak out so fast. I mean, hell, they had op-eds written in a matter of 2 days, man, from some people that I know can't put sentences together. So I don't know who wrote those things for them. But I mean, they churned them out, baby. I mean, we were getting op-eds left and right about how we don't need this government efficiency stuff in Alabama because the Republicans are in control and they got this under control, baby. Don't worry about it. Don't even worry about it. We're good.
Yeah, they had it under control, but we had to increase the gas tax, and now we're having to do other things to generate more revenue. Yeah, you got it under control, all right.
Yeah, exactly.
Not through cuts.
Yeah, right. Well, hey, man, listen, I appreciate you coming on in short notice and doing this and laying things out and providing people with a perspective that I think they really need to hear and to let people, I think it's important, man, to let people know that there are people out there who are taking things seriously, who are taking their real life kitchen table concerns seriously and trying to come up with an idea to help people who are struggling, like the farmers, like the folks working, like all these folks that, I mean, what you've talked about in here is going to help far more people than anything that the Republicans have talked about in years. And so, and I think a lot of people will appreciate that. And so and I know we appreciate you coming on and doing it and spending some time with us.
And I know it's not popular, but we have a lot of Republican allies on these issues. A lot of them.
Yeah.
And organizations that are non-traditional organizations that, before my tenure, I know Democrats didn't work with. They considered them to be the enemy. But I will tell you, there are some areas of common ground that we found. And for me, I'll work with anyone on areas of common ground that's just right for Alabama. And so there are a lot of folks there's some that have co-sponsored the overtime bill last week. There are some that have talked to me about, hey, I'm going to support it. I'm on board 100%. What can I do to help? And so I think that, in all fairness, there are those that are actually on board with this. There's only a few that's pushed back, but they're in key positions. And so what we have to do is elevate the voices of those, the least of thee, and those that really have a genuine concern about the state, instead of allowing a few people to dictate where dollars go and how they're spent, but don't want any accountability on those dollars.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, that's a fantastic plan and goal, and I would love to see it carried through. But thank you for spending some time. We're going to slide
Yeah.
out. We'll come back in just a minute, wrap this thing up. It's Alabama Politics This Week. Alrighty, welcome back. Alabama Politics This Week. Josh Moon, David Person. Thanks to Anthony Daniels for coming on. And
Always.
every time Anthony's on, it's always a really good, substantive conversation about things. It's obvious that he spends a lot of time thinking about and considering a lot of these problems and a lot of these issues and the legislation that he's going to put forth to address a lot of them, and that the party's going to put forth to address a lot of these things. And I think people should appreciate that a lot more. There are a lot of people in legislature and government in general that who don't care nearly as much as they should, who don't put in that effort. And I think it's important that we recognize it whenever possible that somebody is. And I think he does. There are others. I'm not saying they're not. And there are even some Republicans, I think, that do the same thing, that actually sit around and think about stuff and try to come up with meaningful ways to address it. And I think those, they should all be recognized a lot more. And we should hold everybody to that standard. You see it. You see it there in practice. I mean, we should hold everybody to that standard. And stop rewarding morons like, Tommy Tuberville and some of these other people. Also, thanks to Wind Creek Entertainment, those folks,
Absolutely.
Porch Creeks, they're very, very nice and very helpful, and we really appreciate them. Southern Property Law Center as well, and for all of you for what you do, and for coming on and left us a lot of nice reviews, and we do very well. So we're very happy with everything. So before we get to the right wing nut, I wanted to discuss the trial that's taking place for Mac Marquette, former Decatur police officer who's on trial for murder in the death of Steve Perkins in Decatur. I think everybody is pretty much familiar with that. We've covered it a fair amount on here, and they had an immunity hearing on Tuesday in that case, and they called the tow truck driver, a couple of police officers up to the stand. I don't. There are a couple of things that I took away from it, and the overview, and a lot of this I want to say I got I followed along with Dallas Parker from WHNT, who was in the courtroom and was essentially tweeting out just a running transcript of what was taking place, and she did a fantastic job. She's done that for other cases as well, and she's very good at it. And I would encourage you.
She's a sharp young lady.
Yeah, and I would encourage you to give her a follow. She's very good at what she does. And listen, the reporting in general it has suffered in recent years, and particularly TV reporting. There are very few real, actual, people that you would say are knowledgeable, ingrained, with some sense of history and things that are working at TV stations now. Brian Lawson is one. We've had him on.
That's my boy.
And he's fantastic. But we're running out of people like that in the TV news industry, and it's because they're not paying them. It's not like these people don't exist, or that they're not people who want to do better at it. But you'll get a decent reporter in there, and they figure out, hell, I'm smart. I can go do something else for more money. And I also think this market, this North Alabama market, is if we, I don't know how else to say it. It's sort of a starter market. I mean, you're not going to get a lot of people coming in here with experience and and that's a shame. Huntsville's a big place.
It is, but it's still, I don't know where it ranks now in the TV market rankings,
Yeah.
but it may be, I don't know, I'm just guessing it may be in the 70s or 80s at this point. I don't know, but because of the growth of the city, but
Yeah.
anyway, you just don't, a lot of people come here to start their careers.
Yeah.
And we're really blessed in this market when we have somebody like Brian, like Dallas and others who come here, grow here, stay here. And of course, you and I have a bias as former newspaper guys. If we're going to be honest, newspaper guys, we tend to look down on TV reporters, if we're going to be honest.
No, I mean, they're there for 5 minutes of shit and then, run off. That's a problem.
Yeah. But Brian is a unique kind of cat because he actually started in newspapers.
Yeah.
In fact, he and I used to work together. That's my dude. Love that guy. And then he made the transition to television as the newspaper business was declining in this market. And he's done a good job, and he's brought a lot of depth and gravitas to that newsroom.
Yeah, he does. He does a really good. And listen, it because it's not anybody can go out and ask, the fairly obvious question about things. Where Brian and other people like him separate themselves is the the follow-up questions, and the getting to the actual meat of the matter and telling people, because people sitting at home are going, but what about, and you get those answers from Brian's stories, that he gets but what about, this? Well, what you're saying doesn't make any sense. What about X, Y, and Z? And those questions, that's the reason why we put more stock in newspaper people, is because when you're writing when you have to sit down and write out a lengthy newspaper story, you've got to answer those questions in there. And if you don't, what the way it used to work at a newspaper back when newspapers were a real thing, is an editor would say, "Hey, what about this?"
Yeah.
And you would have to go, well, I don't know, and then they would tell you,
find out.
well, get your ass out there and find out, and that's just, that's how you learned it. That's just, somebody telling you, well, fucking find out. What are you doing? What do you mean you don't know? I mean, it's like there's a great scene from The Wire where Gus walks into this room and there's like 4 reporters standing at the window, and across the city out in front of them there's this big plume of smoke going up, and one of them turns and says, "Look, something's on fire over there," and he pauses for a second and says, "I wonder what it is."
Right.
I mean, like, you're at a newspaper, assholes. Go out and find what it is.
Yeah, that's your job.
Yeah, that's just it's kind of the same way with this stuff. Like, a lot of people are sitting at home going, "I wonder what's on fire." It's your job to tell them what's on fire and why it's on fire and how they're putting it out and what damage it did and who's going to be responsible for it and how much it's going to cost and all this. And so, that you so often don't, get that anymore, and it's nice to stumble upon somebody like Dallas doing this work, and she did a great job from the courtroom, and I think hit all the high points, and it's not a biased thing or anything else. She's just relaying what was said in the courtroom, and so they interviewed at this. For those unfamiliar, if you happen to be unfamiliar, Perkins was shot during a repossession attempt of his truck. He had the tow truck driver had come to try to repossess his truck. He came out of his home, confronted the tow truck driver while holding the firearm. The tow truck driver, in his testimony, claims that Stephen Perkins was pointing the gun at him, was pointing it at his chest and telling him to get out of his yard. This was the first one. So he unhitches everything and leaves. At that point, he calls the police. Tells the police what had happened. Police meet him at the repo lot where he works, and the tow truck driver's name is Combs, and so they start having a conversation about what they're going to do, and they go back over. The police, essentially, several police officers take up positions hiding around Steve Perkins' home. When he comes out a second time, to confront the tow truck driver with holding a firearm again. He's shot by police. Mac Marquette screams, police, get on the ground, or something to that effect. And before he even really gets the words out of his mouth, he starts firing and shoots Steve Perkins dead in his front yard. And so there were a couple of things that came to light in this. And it starts with the tow truck driver's testimony. He's under oath, being questioned by both the defensive lawyer for Marquette and the prosecutor Anderson for the state. And he said, when he called him, he was met at the lot by one police officer, McAdam, Mukkadam. If there's another pronunciation of that, I'm unaware of what the correct one would be, but that's McAdam, I would believe is the way it's pronounced. McAdam tells him that law enforcement cannot be involved in a repo. And the tow truck driver told him that if he was going to go back and get the truck, that he wanted someone there with him for his safety. So McAdam apparently then calls other officers to the repo lot. And Combs testifies, I was told to give them 5 minutes. They were going to go set up, and then I would come in and get the truck. So they sit in the parking lot of the repo lot, and they concoct a plan to go over and hide out, and told the repo guy to give them 5 minutes to get set up and then come and get the truck. Combs even says he did not initially see the police officers when he pulled into the driveway, that they were hidden to that point, that he did see Marquette and another officer behind the house, but only because his lights from the truck hit him. And so that was the only way that he was able to see them. And of course, all of the shooting and everything took place. They then had another one of the McAdam was on the stand and talked to him about what took place. And these people, I mean, they admit here that that it was against policy for them to be there. There was a sergeant involved. Marquette, I can understand if what they say is true, then I can understand why Marquette is the one most heavily charged, because he is the one that set up the plan to go and get it. He's the one that told everybody where to stand and how to position themselves, which I don't really understand, because it seems as though he was the junior officer on the scene. I don't know why he was the one in charge of basically creating the scene. And so, I don't. So McAdam testified that the tow truck driver told him he didn't want to go and swear out a warrant, which was the proper step to take. They were supposed to go and get a warrant and to say, hey, this guy threatened me with a gun or whatever, and we need to repossess the truck. They're supposed to go through the court system at that point, in which case then the officers could be involved in this. And once there's a court order to go and get the truck, much less a warrant, then the officers can be involved at that point forward. Now, I mean, I think that there's some gray area to me, okay, with what we've done with our gun laws. There's a lot of gray area to me, and whether or not it's menacing, which is what they were claiming that Steve Perkins did to the tow truck driver. When you come out of your house, rightly or wrongly, you feel your truck should not be being repossessed, and you're holding a firearm, and you tell someone to get out of your yard.
Mm-hmm.
I personally believe that we should live in a country where that's not allowed, but that's not the country we live in. Okay. It's certainly not the state that we live in, where we've told everybody to go get a gun. And if you need protection, to carry that gun with you to get people to do what you want them to do when they're on your property.
Yes.
All right?
Standing your ground, right?
That's right.
Standing your ground. Yeah.
Protecting yourself, defending yourself, making sure people know that this is how you're going to treat this situation.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I guess we can argue the finer points of the law of stand your ground versus menacing or whatever. Okay. But that aside, This is what took place, and this is what
How
they
do you
told him.
distinguish between the two in this case?
I don't know. I really don't. But
how do you call it menacing?
But I
He
don't
was
know
on his
that
property, you know.
well, I even tell you this: if they really thought it was menacing, shouldn't they have gone over and announced themselves and said, "Hey, we're going to place you under arrest for menacing here." You know, but they didn't do that. And McAdams says, "Well, officers can be present during a repossession, but they can't get involved." It's a pretty fine line to walk, you know. And he said that he had calls like this before that he went out on, but he had never been reprimanded for it.
And that's not even logical to me, because if they can't get involved, then why are they there? What's the point of them being there if they can't get involved?
I'll tell you, that was asked. And he told them that he was there to keep the peace. They were there to keep the peace.
Again,
and I thought Anderson did the prosecuting attorney did a pretty excellent job of. I said because he asked him, he said this previous time where you went out on a call was what time of day? He said it was daytime. It was a daytime call. And he said, and did you set up tactically like you did in this particular instance? And he said no. He said, you testified the driveway was well lit, but was the corner, the side of the house? And it depends on how far back you go. He said, why'd you call for backup? Due to the nature of the call, person with a gun, potentially dangerous. Anderson, how can the peace be kept if all of the parties, including Mr. Perkins, doesn't know you're there?
And his answer was?
Oh, we weren't hiding. We were standing by.
Lies.
He said, you keep saying that you came out. Where'd you come out from?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Lies.
Oh, we weren't hiding. Concealment means hiding, right? And he
by
said, yes.
definition.
Yeah. He said, Anderson said, so then you would agree that you were hiding from Mr. Perkins. McAdams finally says, yes. He said, could you have gone up and knocked on the door? McAdams, it was a civil matter, and if we did that, we would have been involved in it.
Heck, you were involved anyway. You're there. You're there. Your very presence makes you involved.
Here's a good one. He said, you all devised a plan. What was it? McAdams, that we would escort him over and he would come out and do the repo. Anderson, we don't have body cam of your conversation with the tow truck driver. Did you violate department policy by not having it on? McAdams, yes. I didn't have any battery on me.
Wow.
Yeah. Who decided where you were going to lead your vehicles? Marquette did. Who led the way? Marquette. Who told you to go across the street? Marquette.
Well, it sounds like the police department has decided who their sacrificial lamb is going to
there's
be.
no doubt about that. You were aware that the first repo attempt didn't go well, correct? You knew that it was not a peaceful situation, correct? Did you think it was reasonable to introduce two civilians into it? Because I'll also add in here that the tow truck driver had a friend with him in the cab of the truck. He wasn't supposed to be there because that's a liability on, and he's since been, the tow truck driver has since been fired for violating the policy of the tow truck company.
Right.
And so he's gotten fired. And they asked him, do you thought it was reasonable to then introduce two civilians into this unpeaceful situation? You thought that was reasonable? McAdams, yes. Before you all arrived at Mr. Perkins' residence for the second repo attempt, had you been trained on de-escalation? Yes. Did you expect the repo attempt would be different the second time around? Yes. What made you think it would be peaceful based on the history? I don't know how to answer that.
Yeah, well, duh. I guess you wouldn't.
That anybody has defended this. Okay? Listen, I'm with you a little bit on this in terms of Marquette being the sacrificial lamb on this thing. I think they've hung this kid out to dry to a certain degree. And I'm not saying, don't misunderstand and think I'm taking away his responsibility. I'm not, okay?
Yeah.
I think others are equally as responsible and should be held to a similar fate as Mac McAdams.
Well,
Marquette.
I don't disagree with you because
Yeah.
I don't disagree with you because, as you've pointed out at some point in our conversation, this guy was not the senior officer, right?
No, he's like 20 years old. He's like 22, 23, something like that. I mean, there's no way he's the senior officer.
Yeah. So, I mean, there are other people, and I don't know if he literally is it even conceivable? I haven't followed this closely enough to know. Is it even conceivable that he outranked?
No, there was a sergeant.
Anybody?
There was a sergeant on the scene. They called this sergeant to set it up.
So then your point is well made. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, yes, he's been hung out to dry. Yes, it sounds like he's going to be the one going down. But other people were culpable here.
Yes. Yes. I do not understand. Look, I'm gonna put it in another term too. If this afternoon, three black kids pull up to a convenience store, and one of them goes in and robs the place. All right, and in the course of that robbery, the other two sit in the car, and in the course of that robbery, someone gets accidentally shot and killed. All three of them are charged with murder. All three of them. It doesn't matter that they sat in the car and they didn't go in. It doesn't even matter that they didn't necessarily know that that's what the guy was going in there to do. All right? They're still going to charge all three of them with murder. And we're not even charged these guys with anything. There's something they should be charged with for doing this. All right? They knew they weren't supposed to be there. They've already admitted it. They knew that the situation went poorly beforehand. They hid around the house and set up an insane situation that was never going to go in any rational person's mind. How would you ever think that it was going to go okay or be okay?
Yeah.
It's nuts, man. And the idea that nobody else did it and a man lost his life over this nonsense right here, when everybody involved knew that they should not be there. And then admitted later that they also don't know the law that says once he came out and confronted him, that it was then illegal for that tow truck driver to go back. It was illegal. Under state law, he was then supposed to let it go and go through the court system because he had been confronted at that time. Now, we had Carl Cole on here, the attorney indicator, and he talked about this as well. And I mean, that's just the law, you know. And I don't know where Perkins was on the payments for the truck or whether it should have been repossessed or not. I mean, maybe it should have been repossessed. I know talking when we had
the family
Carl,
says no.
Yeah, and Carl said that it was a kind of a convoluted mess of different lien holders that did it. Now, they introduced documents in court, apparently, that showed he was 3 months behind on payments. I mean, maybe it was as straightforward as that. I don't know. All right? I know that they got the truck back. So, you know, something happened.
Yeah.
But, you know, so... but regardless, you shouldn't be killed in your front yard because you're behind on payments for your truck. Okay. And even if you come out and confront the tow truck driver because you don't think he should be pulling away with your truck, you still shouldn't be shot dead in your front yard, you know? And if your police officer's handling the situation in a proper manner, then you show up and you say, hey, he's here to repossess your truck. We can't get involved in this. All right. But we can't have you running around with a gun out in the front yard because that's not safe for anybody. All right. So what we're going to do is if you don't want him to repossess the truck, then we're all going to get the hell out of here because the law says that that's what has to happen. But, you know, he says you're behind. Y'all can work this out, whatever. But otherwise it's going to go through the court system.
Yeah.
Or they could have just told the tow truck driver, either fill out a warrant for menacing, and we'll see what we can do down the road somewhere, and then go through the court system, and everybody went the hell home.
Right. All of what you said makes sense.
So
the one thing that doesn't make sense is what happened.
Yes. That's the only situation. The only way that this could have ended the way that it did was for them to do exactly what they did.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just, and it's atrocious that anybody is out there defending it. And it's not, and pretending as though, it was just a horrible situation for the cops. They created the situation for themselves. Okay.
Yep.
And a man lost his life over it.
Yep.
And that's the end of the story. And somebody's going to be held responsible for it.
Yep.
So,
and I'm glad for that.
Yeah. All right.
Glad for that.
Right-wing nut are all those people.
Hey, before White Wing Nut, let's just give a real
I'm sorry.
quick.
I forgot all about it.
Yeah, we're going to give a real quick shout out. We don't shout Republicans out very often on this podcast for obvious and good reasons, I would argue. But in this particular case,
we've shouted out a few.
But we don't do it often.
That's right.
And I think in this particular case, even though this is going to be controversial to some people, I think Representative Rick Grimm of Dothan, a Republican, deserves a positive shout out for HB 165, which he's the sponsor of, that if it is passed, through the legislature and signed by the governor, will make Juneteenth an Alabama state holiday, and it will not be done in conjunction with Jefferson Davis's birthday. It'll be a separate holiday standing on its own. Now, I know that our friend Representative Wandalyn Gavon has tried to do this.
Okay.
Well, okay, I'll say my friend.
She mad at me, so she called me all sorts of things. That's fine.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll say my friend.
Okay.
Wandalyn Gavon.
I didn't do anything to her.
I'm going to leave all that alone. I'm going to let you and Wandalyn work that out. I know that she tried to champion this in the past and did not get it through the legislature, and according to her, caught some hell over trying to do so. And I know she's upset based on at least one news story I read that now this has got the support of the Republican-dominated legislature. And I understand where she's coming from, but I'm going to say that I still think it's great that this bill is being passed, because this will be good for the state of Alabama, good for Black people in the state of Alabama, good for all people in the state of Alabama. Mm-hmm. So I think it's good, regardless of why he's doing it. And I understand also that his voting base, the people of Dothan that he represents, that those voters there are 40% Black people. So that, I'm sure that's part of his motivation.
That's how it should work, though.
That's
how it should work.
And that's right. And you're right. And you're exactly right. You're supposed to represent the interest of the people that are in your district.
100%.
So he's doing that.
You're supposed to do what they would like to have done as well.
That's right. So he's listening to them, and he's doing it, and I'm going to commend him for it.
Well, yeah, I can as well. It's always been my goal not only to introduce Juneteenth and Rosa Parks, holiday, birthday, and as a holiday, but also to get rid of those 2-3 ridiculous Confederate holidays that are embarrassing to everybody in the state. It should be an utter. It is. The fact that we're still doing it, the fact that we ever recognized Jefferson Davis, who didn't live here, who didn't like it here, who didn't have any connection to the state at all, other than staying here for 6 months or so while the capital was here for the racist states, and then the Robert E. Lee, same situation, no ties here at all. It's just a middle finger to the Black families here in this state. And I think we ought to get rid of them. And I'm fine with Rick Ream. I know you can only do so much, at one time. But to me, we've got to get rid of some of those things and put more appropriate holidays in and honor better people. And to me, if people knew the whole story of Rosa Parks and her life and what she did, they should make comic books. They should make comic books about her.
She's
superhero.
Really.
Yeah.
Superhero.
It's just, what she did through her life is, and honestly, man, it pisses me off that people think of her as a tired seamstress. That's what pisses me off. I mean, it just, she wasn't a tired seamstress. She was a
Well,
badass lady.
she wasn't tired physically. She was tired emotionally and
That's right.
spiritually of what was happening to black people in Montgomery, Alabama.
Yeah. So, I mean, the work she did as an NAACP investigator, the people she took on, the stories she wrote about people that exposed them for raping black women and creating just absolute terror in black communities in the South at that time, and taking on these white, powerful men. And, I mean, just this diminutive lady that didn't, I mean, she didn't scare, man.
Superhero.
She didn't scare.
Superhero.
Just it's something else. It really is. So, but yeah, congratulations to Rick Rim for doing one smart thing. And so
that sounded a little shady, but okay. A little backhanded, but okay.
I don't know what else he's done. So I know he's done one smart thing.
Yeah, I don't know what else he's done either, but I applaud him for this.
He did. He was involved in the whole veteran stuff, and I was kind of on their side in that thing as well.
Okay.
The veterans thing. So, all right. Let's our right wing nuts are the people that sat at that hearing and who were on the text chain they were just handing out war plans, and discussing it, and then tried to act as though they were somehow the victims in all this, to this great Democratic plot that was orchestrated by Joe Biden.
Of course.
And Mike Waltz, who went on Fox News and proclaimed, he was the one that added the journalist Jeffrey Goldberg into the chat, and then went on Fox News later and tried to claim that Goldberg was not in his phone and he didn't know how he got added. It was just they're examining it. Some of the smartest tech people out there are examining this right now to try to get to the bottom of it. Yeah, okay, let's see what happens, bud. Let's see what happens, Mike. So, all right. We're going to get ourselves out of here. We're giving way more than you deserve, way more than you paid for. But until next week, y'all be safe out there.
Peace.